Live from Studio A, I'm Kyle Youmans here for All-American as the entire football schedule into the regular season all the way in the past now in the rearview mirror for the American Athletic Conference. The title game has concluded, and we've got a lot of bowl games and postseason to talk about, including the Army-Navy game coming up this week. Nothing more American on All-American than the Army-Navy game. And in order to do this the right way, we've got to welcome in Maria Trivelpeice, my phenomenal co-host who has been on the road in a plane, trains, and automobiles across the country covering the American Conference over these last couple of weeks because you had Champ Week, Tulane and Army getting after it up in West Point at Michie Stadium last week, and now we get ready for Landover, Maryland to be the center of attention in the college football world as Army and Navy prepare for the 125th meeting of their rivalry. Plenty to talk about, Maria. Where are you at right now? Because I've lost track at this point in time because you've been all the way across the country.
I know. I think I should start like a hashtag or something like "Where's Maria?" But Maria's in Maryland right now. As you mentioned, that's where the Army-Navy game is going to be. So after we finished up at West Point, I made my way to Landover, Maryland. I made a couple stops in between because, that's always how it goes. But yeah, currently at Northwest Stadium, just finished up with the Army Media Luncheon yesterday. So just like a lot of fun happening here in Maryland.
I can't wait to talk about that matchup, and we're going to preview Army-Navy very much so in depth as we go on this episode of All-American. But we got to start with the American Athletic Conference Championship this past Friday. Army taking down Tulane in emphatic fashion. First ever conference championship for the Army Black Knights, and of course the first time in the American Conference. Make quite the statement, Maria. You were on site at Michie Stadium. What an atmosphere it was, and it certainly lived up to the hype for the Black Knights.
No, absolutely. And I think one thing that really stood out to me just being there was the way that Army dominated from start to finish. There was never a point in the game where you thought they were going to give up the lead, that they were going to let up in any way, shape, or form. And I think it's something that head coach Jeff Monken talked about, like leading up to that week. We had a chance to chat with him a couple of times. And one thing that he continuously preached was that this team takes everything one game at a time and they forget whatever happened the week before, the day before. It's so present. And I think that's why they were able to recover from that loss to Notre Dame. And they were even able to recover from like a win not too long ago to UTSA. So they just looked so incredibly dominant against the Green Wave. And Bryson Daly just did Bryson Daly things as we expected him to. But yeah, definitely a fun game to watch.
No doubt about it. And it was a ton of fun to watch. It was very impressive. And it all culminated with the championship moment as we take a listen.
Coleman under center, victory formation, takes a knee. Army will not have to snap the football again. The Black Knights come storming off the sideline, and the magic carpet ride continues for the Army football team. The core storming the field. Army, in its first year in the American Athletic Conference, goes undefeated through the regular season and then blows out Tulane in the American Athletic Conference championship game. Army is your AAC champion for 2024, 35-14 over Tulane.
The voice of the Black Knights, Rich DeMarco, with the call on the Army Sports Network. So much fun watching the Black Knights raise the trophy, and they've certainly raised the expectations as a program in their first year as a part of the American Athletic Conference. Only the 8th year that they've ever been in a conference. They've spent 7 in Conference USA, have been independent from that point forward, and then now in the American and winning a championship the way that they did. Just an unbelievable sight, sound, and scene there up in Michie Stadium, and I can't even imagine what you were able to experience in those moments, Maria.
It was incredible. I mean, you saw the core storming the field. I think that was one of the coolest parts of it from start to finish, too. We were doing the pregame show.
Yeah.
The core was hitting on Tulane. There were cannons fired. If you haven't checked out social media, you can see some of the cannons being fired while we were on the desk, and me and Lige Duzable just completely jumping out of our seats because, you don't expect that to happen. But that's something that's so unique about Army West Point is just the like just the fact both Army and Navy, the academies, they have so much tradition. There's all these little things that don't happen at normal football games. And so to see them win it on their home field, to see the core just storm the field, and to see the seniors like Bryson Daly be able to play that last game in Mikey Stadium, that was something that they talked about a ton. I think it was just so cool. It was one of the coolest championship moments I think I've ever been a part of, just to see that program in their first year in the American Athletic Conference walk away victorious.
Well, and Jeff Monken has talked about it throughout the season that the first goal is to win the conference championship. The second goal is to beat Navy, and they've got a chance to go back-to-back this week in order to do so, and then they've got postseason play following that. But on the field, I mean, I was impressed from the jump. The fact that not only the atmosphere lived up to the expectation, but so did the offensive attack from Army, and the defense was tremendous as well. You mentioned the leadership of guys like Bryson Daly, but it was the leaders across the board. Guys like Kanye Udo having some success. They had that bobbled snap on the opening drive from Tulane. It resulted in the missed opportunity at a field goal, and they could never really recover from there because Army was pressing the issue. They were dominant at the line of scrimmage. They ran the ball effectively with Udo, with Daly, with whoever had the rock for the Army Black Knights. The whole rushing attack got back to doing what Army does best, and that is drive down the field, kill time of possession. They averaged that 35 minutes time of possession throughout the season. They continued to live up to that as well. And I think when you look at what Tulane did best, let's take the football away on defense. When Army entered this game off of 3 straight games where they really didn't play great football. Against North Texas, slow start, only had 14 points. You got beat by Notre Dame in that matchup in a non-conference game. And then you kind of had a slow start against UTSA, found your rhythm late against the Roadrunners. They put all that behind them. And that's what stood out to me about Army in this football game, is the fact that they put it all behind them. They took care of the football against the team that was in the top 10 in terms of turnover margin defensively, and that's how they won the football game, was by playing Army's style of football and doing it for all 4 quarters, ultimately winning this one 35-14.
Yeah, and I think that they just capitalized on all of Tulane's mistakes as well, and they forced a lot of mistakes. You mentioned some of them. I think the one for me was when the Army kicker, Trey Granati, actually forced the fumble, and that eventually led to Army just having more opportunities.
Crazy.
And I think that was something, it was so much fun to watch, because there's so many little things that matter in a football game, and Army was able to capitalize on all of them. And I also think, too, you take advantage of the fact that you're playing at home and you're playing in an environment that Tulane isn't used to. Like, it was cold in West Point. And, a lot of those guys on that Tulane Green Wave team hadn't played in that weather. That's something that John Summerall talked about a little bit in his press conference leading up to that game. And so I think that Army just flushed all of those, not even losses, but kind of missteps in previous games, and was able to capitalize, and that's why they're ultimately American Conference champions.
Did it surprise you at all the way that Bryson Daly and this Army offense was able to move the football against Tulane's front seven? Because it certainly surprised me. I went into the game thinking Tulane not only had a great shot to win, but I thought they would be more physical defensively than they ultimately were. I thought that offensive line, I know Bryson Daly and Kanye Udo and all these guys that are going to carry the football are going to get the shine, Maria, and they certainly deserve it. But that offensive line had probably, at least in my opinion, their best performance of the year because of what they faced with the Green Wave front seven.
Well, to answer your question is whether or not I was surprised.
Yeah.
Yes and no. I think we talked about it on that championship preview, that we just thought that Tulane was going to be able to come in there and dominate. But I think what changed for me was when I was able to speak to Bryson Daly leading up to that game. He talked consistently about that offensive line, and he talked about them in such high regard and had such confidence in them coming into that game, because we asked him about it specifically. And the way that his language was, and we also talked to Max DiDomenico as well about the defense as a whole, their confidence level in the questions that I asked and their answers to it, I don't know. I talk about vibes a lot. Maybe it's because I've just been around certain athletes. I feel like you can tell which team's going to win a football game or which team's going to win a game based on their answers to questions that you ask them leading up to the game and the way that they carry themselves. The Army's language and Bryson Daly's language about the offensive line and just about the game in general was like, when we win at Mikey, when we get to hoist that trophy. And I think that those little differences are what started to change my mind as we kind of headed into the game. Now, I going into that game, Tulane just looked so strong. Minus that loss to Memphis, they were playing some of their best football. So I wasn't totally convinced, but just the aura and the vibes. I keep saying vibes, but that's exactly what it was. So not as surprised as I was before interviewing Army, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. It really does. And a lot of times that's kind of what you talk about with Army and Coach Munkin and the discipline that they have instilled not only from a football sense, but really from a life sense at these service academies. And when you can pair that with talent, which they have plenty of talent, especially on the offensive line, it makes for something special. And we'll talk more about Army as we get into the Army-Navy matchup as we continue on, because there's a chance for them to really do some more special. It's already a special season. You win your first ever conference championship in your first year inside the league. That's special in its own right. But the fact that you can continue that and take it to another level over the next 2 games. They've still got 2 games to play, which is wild to think about as well. They could really make some noise there, too. Now, from a Tulane aspect, as Army wins this football game far and away, where do you go from Tulane? I know they've got the Independence Bowl, or excuse me, their bowl game coming up in a couple of weeks as well. When it comes to Tulane, how do you put the pieces back together after a performance like that?
Well, I think one thing that's exciting for Tulane is that we saw on social media that John Summerall's not going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
He told everyone, look, I'm coming. And if you haven't checked out his Twitter, he uses a GIF from Wolf of Wall Street. It's hilarious. Go check it out. Leaving. The man has a great Twitter game. I will say that. And so I think you kind of roll with that momentum, right? You were one of the best football teams in the country for a point of time, right? And you had talk about making that college football playoff. So that is still a very good football team. So I think you take that and the players that are going to play in that game and you use that as momentum, right? You still have something that you can play for. You still have something that you can win. You have a great leader in John Summerall who has created a program in just his first year and led them to a lot of success. So I think that's where they kind of go, and there's still a lot to play for in that final bowl game for them.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens whenever it comes to the roster. Darian Mensah, still very young. Mekhi Hughes has some eligibility left. He's one of the top running backs in all of college football. I'm excited to see where this team takes a step under Coach Summerall and company, because Summerall has all of it taken care of, first-year ability, and not to mention the Gasparilla Bowl is the bowl game that they've got coming up against Florida. There's a chance there for Tulane to take down the SEC opponent in Florida. Of course, there's a lot of fun between those two out of the Southeast themselves. So really excited about that matchup. The fact that Mekhi Hughes was held to 14 carries for 66 yards was really impressive from Army. And I think that's the exception, not the rule. This is a really good football team, and despite the performance that they had on that Friday night up at Michie Stadium, I still believe it was the best 2 coaching staffs, the best 2 fronts, the best 2 offensive lines, or at least on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and the best 2 teams across the board of the American Conference. And that won't change my mind, the fact that Army dominated the way that they did. Tulane deserved to be there on that stage and to perform. They just didn't perform the way that they anticipated going into it. So lots to talk about whenever it comes to the American season, but we've got the biggest game of the year. And I have no problem saying that. This is the biggest game of the college football year every single time. It's happened for 124 occasions. It's going to happen for the 125th time. It is Army and Navy. Navy leads the all-time series by 7 games. That's what they've got it, but Army is hot on their heels, winning 6 of the last 8, including the last 2 meetings. And since both Army and Navy had already beaten Air Force early in the season, the winner will lift a trophy in Landover, Maryland. America's game, I feel like, is a great title for it, but it really doesn't have that same mentality as the spirit of this game. I mean, what does this game mean to not only college football, but really the country as a whole?
Well, I have to start with pointing out now both teams are in the American Conference. It's America's game, so the branding is right on point there. But I think one thing to answer your question is when I was listening to the press conference yesterday, the big message was that this is the greatest rivalry in college football, because this rivalry began, and I believe it was Brian Newberry who said this at the press conference. He said, this rivalry began in the deepest of respect of the opponent. So it didn't just start because, two schools are close to each other. It started because these two teams have so much respect for each other, no matter how much they fight and hate each
as
other
the year goes on too, and early in the season they're taking shots at each other.
The pettiness, all of it. As much as that is part of it, they have so much respect for what the other one does because they're the only two that kind of understand, and Air Force as well, what goes on at those different academies. And in addition to that, he was just talking about the fact that eventually they'll come together and fight for something so much greater than themselves. So there's so much pettiness and hating, and you have the beat Army, beat Navy emblazoned everywhere on their respective school in their respective schools. But I think that this is what that game means. It's just, this game is so much bigger than the young men on the field because there are generations of this game. There are families that come to this game. There are families that have such a deep connection to it, as well as this country. And so I think that that's the best way that it can be summed up, if there even is a way to sum it all up.
Well, I think the way that I look at this game is it's the only game and the only rivalry, because it's a true college football rivalry, but it's the only one in the country and the only one ever to where everyone watching can cheer for at least something on both sides. On both sides of the rivalry, whether you're cheering for Army or you're cheering for Navy, like you said, that mutual respect is there. But as a fan and an outsider, you're cheering for everyone, because that's what this is. It is the service that is being placed upon all of these individuals as student athletes, as servicemen and women. It is unbelievable the way that they are all able to come together, whether the game's in Landover, Maryland, or Philadelphia like it's been in the past. I mean, there are so many different environments. You could play this game down the street at the local park. It's still going to have the same spirit and mentality as it did 125 different meetings ago, because it's been the same from year one. And I don't know if you can say that from every rivalry in football. I just got finished calling the Iron Bowl a couple of weeks ago, one of the other great rivalries in college football. Let me tell you this. Auburn, Alabama, they hate each other so much. It has nothing on the framework and the spirit of Army Navy and what it brings to the table on the gridiron. I cannot wait. It's a must-watch event every single year for me. It should be for any college football fan as a whole, and it is again this year, especially with how good these two teams have been, Maria. They've been fantastic. We've talked about the Sling T, Blake Horvath, and the Navy midshipmen off to a great start this year. Started the year undefeated, kind of stumbled a little bit down the stretch as their schedule got tougher and tougher. And then we just finished talking about how the Army Black Knights took home the American Conference Championship. So historical season for both of these organizations, both of these programs, and now they get a chance to really top it off the best way possible by winning this matchup.
Well, I think that's the coolest part, right? Because in different years, maybe one team is way better and then the other. And no matter what, when they come together, it doesn't matter what the records are. It's always a battle, right? No pun intended there. It's always a battle. But this year, the fact that they are both so good and they've had the seasons that they've had, I think it's really interesting. And I think that's another thing that they talked about yesterday at the press conference was the fact that, in this era of college football, everybody was worried, like, oh, how are Army, Navy, Air Force going to do? Like, can't use the portal, NIL, all that stuff. And the fact that they've been so successful is just like another notch in their belt. Like, wow, this is something that is just adds to that tradition, right? This tradition stays alive in the current climate of what college athletics is in this moment. And so that's something that I'm really excited about. And, when you talk about tradition of this game, a big tradition is also the jerseys and the reveal and just the comparison of both of those teams and what they come up with every year.
Let's talk about the jerseys a little bit, because I want to get deeper into the X's and O's here momentarily. But let's start with Army. The jerseys are one of the best parts of all of this rivalry, and it adds that intrigue around it. The nation is watching. Here's what Army is bringing to the table.
Today, a milestone in the modernization of the United States Army is taking place at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. It is the Reorganization Day ceremony of the new 101st Airborne Division, better known as the Screaming Eagles of World War II fame.
First activated during World War II, the 101st Airborne Division, better known as the Screaming Eagles, were routinely called into action when the need was immediate and extreme, becoming known as a relentless fighting force that never turned down a difficult mission. All of these battles during this time led the 101st to their greatest rendezvous with destiny the division had ever seen.
Then suddenly, from France, we're heading for Belgium. Under cover of fog and bad flying weather, the Wehrmacht launches a desperate counterattack. They're throwing 25 divisions at us. Our lines reel back. The Battle of the Bulge is on.
Germany launched a massive attack in the Ardennes forest. Heavy fog grounded air support for the United States. The goal was to seize and control the 7 roadways of Bastogne. With the extreme winter conditions, there were minimal supplies, and the 101st were outgunned, outnumbered, and surrounded on all sides. The German troops saw this as a time to ask for the 101st surrender, but this band of brothers had other plans.
On the 22nd, the German commander, ridiculously enough, demanded surrender of the surrounded town. I just replied nuts, for I knew that one word best expressed the feelings of the division.
That belief, combined with their disruption, preparation, and flexibility, proved to be the key difference as they were able to fight off the enemy and claimed another big win for the Allied powers in World War II.
Through it all, no one doubted for an instant that we would hold the town under any sort of attack the Germans could put on. The 101st Airborne Division has met and defeated the Germans in Normandy and Holland and will continue to do so whenever called upon.
On the 80th anniversary of the Siege of Bastogne, we pay homage to the Screaming Eagles, who prevailed against all odds, holding their ground against a massive German offensive in the Ardennes forest. Go Army! Beat Navy!
This generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny.
Not only some of the coolest jerseys you will ever see on the gridiron, but the meaning behind it, highlighting the 101st Airborne, one of the most famous World War II battles in its 80th anniversary, the Battle of, and I'm going to butcher the name here. Bastion. Okay, so I'm not French or I don't have anything, I don't have the thought process behind it, but the fact that it's all highlighted in the military history behind it all, meaning so much for these jerseys going into it, I just think it's tremendous. And this is not new from Army. They do this every year. Navy does it as well, and both sides have great looks. We'll look at Navy in a moment. But the fact that there's so much history and there's so much close-knit mentality whenever it comes to this unit, it is really fun and cool to see as it all comes together on the football field.
Well, that's just the thing. We're talking about a football game, right? But when you think about the symbolism of the uniforms that are being worn in that football game, it's completely paying homage to basically everything that happened happened before so that these young men can compete on the football field. And so I just think the thought process that goes into it. Also, like a huge shout out to like the people that are actually creating and designing the uniforms, the social teams that are putting those videos together, because I think that also adds to the excitement around this game and also adds to the honor and the tradition that is paid respects to in all of these capacities. And so I think so much goes into just the uniforms in this game, let alone everything else. And I think that's something that, again, just highlights so many cool things about this game.
No doubt about it. And there's so many different parties that have had their hands on making these uniforms possible. And then the history behind it certainly molded the uniforms as well. So we've shined a spotlight on the all-black look from Army. Let's take a look at what Navy has this week.
Born in the battles of World War II, the Jolly Rogers have been freedom's guardians of the sky. Forged by the United States Navy, victory is the standard. After 8 decades, a new chapter in history will be written. If you hear them coming, fear the bones. Here's to victory. Here's to the bones.
From a rendezvous with destiny to fear the bones of the Jolly Rogers and a VF-17 squadron founded during World War II. The Jolly Rogers and the Jolly Roger flag hoping to be flying high for the Navy midshipmen as they take on the Army Black Knights this week. Another great look. You got the all black from Army. You got the all white and the icy look from the Jolly Rogers of Navy this week. It really is. It's going to be an unbelievable uniform matchup and matchup as a whole.
I love the color caps on the sleeve, like, and then into the bones. Oh my goodness. I also just like, I get like anxious watching those videos. I'm like, thank goodness I've never been like tried to be in the military or could fight. Like, I'm nervous watching those. Like, and I think it just speaks to the courage of, you know, just the past people who have served in our armed forces, but also the courage of the people on this field on this coming weekend who are going to serve this country. And so again, we can't say it enough, but thank you to all of them who have served and those who continue to serve, because the amount of courage and just fearlessness that they exemplify, not only when they're playing sports, but when they're literally defending our country. I think that's something that, wow, you can't say enough about.
No doubt. And I think that's one of the other sentiments of this game. Of course, all the spotlight of the nation is on Army versus Navy, but also the spotlight is on the military as a whole and what the armed forces do for our country, and the fact that we are able to play these football games week in and week out and have as much attention around them is because of them in the first place. So let's get back to the field and kind of how this thing's going to pan out from an X's and O's standpoint, because when you look at this Navy team, we talked about the start to the season, undefeated, dropped a couple games late. They're the only FBS football team in the country that had just 2 home games in their final 9 regular season games. That's a tough schedule and back and forth. I mean, that's the Maria Trivelpeice special of all over the country, bouncing from city to city, school to school, and playing all these games. But I don't have to
tackle people when I travel from place to place.
Exactly.
Maybe.
You just have to deal with me on a weekly basis. That's all it is. But
that's a little bit trickier, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that might be harder than you anticipate. Now, with all that being said, this game being in Landover, Maryland is only, about a 20-minute, 25-minute drive from Annapolis? I mean, this is a de facto home game. Now, it'll be pretty 50-50 because of Army and Navy and what that means between both schools and the military as a whole. But the fact that this is closer to home, it's an easier travel schedule this year for Navy. This is an important opportunity for them to try and get back on track and try and salvage what the back half of the season has already been. It's been a great season. They're going to continue their year as they go along. Of course, they've already qualified and accepted the bid to the Armed Forces Bowl against Oklahoma. Really excited about that matchup as well. But when both of these teams have the seasons that they've had so far, it would be all about Navy upending Army's momentum, and they are trying to do that.
Well, I think at the beginning of this season, right, we were looking at both these teams when they were undefeated. And so I think that, again, this game, anything can happen, but I think these teams are a little bit more evenly matched than we even realized. I think after Navy lost to Notre Dame, they stumbled a little bit, but they looked really good against East Carolina. It looked like more like that Navy team that we saw at the beginning of the year, and Horvath didn't even play. So I just think that this might be closer than we think. And as you said, Kyle, it would be the cherry on top for Navy to give Army a second loss on the season, especially after they just won the American Conference Championship.
No doubt. How about upending all of that momentum and taking that one away? Navy would love that, and I guarantee you that's what's on their mind this week. Army and Navy entering this, of course, historic matchup between the two. Most combined wins between the two programs with 19. There are combined 19 and 4 overall. It's the 5th time that both programs have qualified for a bowl game before going into the matchup, joining 1996, 2010, 2016, and 2017. So the first time since 2017. Of course, Army going to the Independence Bowl. They're taking on Marshall in Shreveport, and then I just mentioned the Armed Forces Bowl against Oklahoma for Navy. Let's start with the Black Knights. They are the reigning American Conference champions, so we'll give them first dibs here. One of the best seasons in program history. How do they continue moving in the right direction? Though they have that conference championship behind them, they've got an important 2 games in front.
Well, I think that's the message that Jeff Monken has been telling his team this entire season. He's grateful to have won the American Conference Championship. You should have seen the speeches in the locker rooms afterwards. It was awesome. This is the game, though, that they circle on their calendars every single year. It's why you go to Army. It's why you go to Navy. And so to answer your question of how they continue it, they have to keep that mentality that they've been having this entire year, that they're 0-0, right? They flush whatever just happened. They flush a loss. They flush a win. They flush a conference championship game. Now they have the next battle in front of them, and that's how they are going to be successful against Navy. And then just leaning on the things that have made them successful: the rushing attack, Bryson Daly playing good defense, and just being aggressive. As we said earlier in the show, they were just able to create so many mistakes for Tulane, and that's why they were able to win. And so I think they have to bring that same meanness and the same thing that they've been doing all season long to the Army-Navy game.
Of course, Army with a 12th win would then set a new program mark for most single-season victories. If they hit 13 by winning this one and then the Independence Bowl, it would actually be the most ever in a single season by any service academy team throughout history of college football. So lots on the line still for Army as a team. You mentioned Bryson Daly. I thought the national support from Daly was very fitting going into, of course, a week where they're going to hand out the Heisman Trophy out in New York. Even Tim Pernetti, the commissioner of the American Conference, vocalizing on Twitter that he believes that Daly should be in New York for that Heisman Trophy ceremony and all of the honors that go along with it. 29 touchdowns speaks for itself. The fact that he's had 29 rushing touchdowns, that's tied for the FBS lead with one of those Heisman candidates in Boise State's running back Ashton Jeanty. Also, not to mention, he has 8 passing touchdowns as well. He's been tremendous, both as a ball carrier and as a passer, so efficient as a passer, which I think is the forgotten element to this Army offense that we mentioned early in the season on All-American, but they continue to pull it out just when they need it the most. Maria, how important is Daly's performance going to be in this matchup against Navy?
Well, he's the X factor, and he has been in pretty much every game that they played. I mean, you saw it in the game that he didn't play in. His team was able to step up and still come out with that victory, but the reason that the tone was even set against Tulane is because Bryson Daly just bullies his way through people. And it's not just his physical ability, right? It's his leadership as well. Jeff Monken has talked about that numerous times. And you know, one thing about both of these schools is that it's one thing to be a captain or a leader on any other program in the country. But at Army and Navy, you have to be a leader of leaders. And I think I'm serious. That's exactly what it is. You are a leader of leader. And that is probably more difficult than other people realize. And Bryson Daly has done that. There's a reason he's captain. There's a reason why his teammates coined the nickname Captain America, which is a whole nother story we'll have to get into maybe another time. But I think that he is the X factor because he sets the tone and the rest of that team goes with him.
Well, and it bleeds over to the defensive side as well. And of course, Army, the fact that they average that 35-minute mark, almost 36 minutes of time of possession always helps. Bryson Daly helps with that. It's that complementary football that we've talked about a couple times on this show. Army's defense ranks 7th in the country in terms of scoring defense, only allowing those 15 points per game throughout the season. Held opponents to under 14 in 9 of the 12 games this season, including the conference title game against Tulane. So, I mean, when we're talking about Bryson Daly, and we're talking about this running attack, and we're talking about time of possession and the way that they control it, This defense is nasty. They are unbelievable on that side of the football, and they continue to show that physicality. I mean, the big hits, the discipline, the gap assignments, the fact that they run to the football at such a high level and an effective level with great angles to the ball. Maria, this defense has shown they are the best in the American. That's why they won the championship and are lifting the trophy. They've got a tough task to do so against the Navy team that runs a similar yet different type of offense than what their own offense brings to the table.
Well, I think I might have said this earlier in the year, but I was talking. I was calling a game, and I was talking to another American Conference coach, and the way that he described Army's defense was that they are just plain mean.
Yeah.
And he meant it in the most complimentary way. And I think you see that because they're mean, they bully you, they push you to make mistakes. And in addition to that, they just work so well as a unit, right? Like when we talk about the Army offense, we can like single out a couple of those players like Bryson Daly or Kanye Udo or Noah Short. The Army defense, yes, you can single out a couple players, but they are so effective because of how mean they are and how they work together as one. And I think they're going to have a tall task again against an offense, like you said, Kyle, that is somewhat similar, but also different to their own.
Yeah, and I think when you look at some of the leaders on this defensive side of the ball, like you said, the names don't stick out, and they don't want it that way. They don't want it to be the names. And I know they've got some of those high-level guys that have played at a high level. I mean, I even go back a couple of years where they had guys like Andre Carter, who ended up going to the NFL and playing some time there for a split second. And they've got NFL caliber discipline on that side of the ball, and you've seen that throughout the season. That's why this unit works so well as a cohesive unit, and they're going to have to do so against Navy. Navy with a great season so far, entering this matchup and doing so with high expectations. I mean, if they didn't win the American Conference title, they didn't end up the season that they wanted to down the stretch, but they can take home the Commander-in-Chief trophy for the first time since 2019 if they do take down Army, and that would make the entire campaign for the Navy midshipmen. What do you want to see out of them this week as they take on the Black Knights?
I want to see them play with no fear. I know that sounds like silly because they're literally, going to fight wars and battles, and not that they ever have.
Courage is all the way across the field.
Yes, literally. Yeah. I just think that when they are flying around and playing with confidence and without fear, that offense is would you call it the sling tee? Is that what you called it?
Sling tee. I did not coin that term. That was from somebody else down the road. I can't remember who coined it. It might have been the coaching staff from Navy, if I remember correctly. But either way, the sling tee.
The sling tee, and I want to see that sling tee just play out the way it did in those first couple of games of the season. You saw it starting to come back in those last couple, and I think that just shows the resiliency of the midshipmen. Even when they lost a couple of games, they were able to rebound and come back, just utilizing what they're good at with that offense. Now, it'll be interesting to see if Horvath is back, and I think one thing that benefits Navy is that they haven't played in a couple of weeks, right? So that gives him time to heal. So I want to see him come back and play like the way that he did in those early games when we had that Horvath for Heisman trending, because he was so good. And we talk about Bryson Daly leading the Army offense. Horvath did that for Navy.
Yeah, he definitely did. The fact that he's accounted for 24 touchdowns, 13 rushing, 11 passing, that's where that sling tee comes to fruition. 1,100 passing yards, most by a Navy player since Will Worth threw for nearly 1,400 yards back in 2016. So it's been 8 years since Navy has seen an efficient passer like Blake Horvath. You mentioned the time off. I mean, they haven't played since that finale, taking down East Carolina 34-20 on the Friday following Thanksgiving. So they'll have over 2 weeks of rest. This isn't a bye week. This is a bye half month whenever it comes to Navy getting ready for this matchup. And you talked about the health of Blake Horvath. If he's able to go, if he's even able to walk, Maria, I think he's on the field because this is Army and Navy. If he's able to throw a football 10 yards downfield, if he's able to walk from the tunnel to the sideline, I think he's playing because he's not going to miss this opportunity. And as much as he's meant to this team as a whole, Navy needs him. He knows it. And I think if he's available, I know he's been dealing with that rib injury, did not play against East Carolina. They ended up winning the game anyways. Good showing that time from Braxton Woodson, who's the backup quarterback, sophomore out of Florida, filled in nicely for Horvath, but it begins and ends with Blake Horvath behind center.
Absolutely. And again, we won't know if he's on the field until we see kickoff or until we see what happens on Saturday. But I think that, as you said, Kyle, no matter what, he's going to try to bandage himself up and get a ball in his hands, because this is the Army-Navy game, and this is the reason why you come to each of these places. It's the one game that matters more than anything else. Ask anyone around either of these programs. They've been talking about it since before they even arrived on the yard or post, whatever your respective campus is.
The one thing I'm looking at for Navy offensively, and I want to touch on their defense here in a moment, but you got to have one of your other guys, maybe both guys, step up in a big way. And I'm looking at Alex Teska and Eli Heidenreich. Both of those guys have had phenomenal seasons, and they've put up great numbers. You need one, if not both of those guys, to have maybe their best game of the year, which is saying something because we've had multi-touchdown, multi-100-yard performances from both of those guys. If you're going to put a finger on where the offensive success is going to lie outside of Blake Horvath, Maria, where would you put it?
I'm going to agree with you on Heidenreich, because I think that we've seen him make really big plays in big moments. I think it was, I don't even remember what week it was, but when he literally kept his toe in bounds and just dragged it across the turf, I believe it was
a top
against
10 play or top 5 play.
It was insane. I watched it live. I was like, there's no way he's in bounds. But my point to that is he can create things on offense when Horvath can't, or if Horvath's not there. Mm-hmm. And the two of them working in tandem just makes that offense that much more lethal. And so that would be my one key where I'm looking for Navy to really capitalize on. And the way that they run their offense really is complementary to the way that he plays football.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And now I look at the defense too, because since they allowed just the 17 points on October 19th against Charlotte, these are the numbers they've allowed defensively. 51 points to Notre Dame, 24 points to Rice, 7 points to South Florida. That was where they played better on the defensive side of the football. Tulane, they gave up the 35 points. East Carolina, they got back to normal with 20. So it's kind of been an up and down final 5 or 6 games of the season for Navy after they were dominant through the first 7 games of the year, with the exception of that shootout that they won, by the way, with Memphis back in week 3. So where do you want to see some impressive play from the Navy midshipmen defense as they try and slow down the Bryson Daly and Kanye Udo show from the Army offense?
I think for me, it's more of the unit idea of the Navy defense, because I think we just got done talking about why Army's so good, and it's the fact that you don't know the individual players and they play so much as a unit. And so I think that they maybe got a little bit banged up earlier in the season, and so I want to kind of see them come together and just stop some of that rushing attack from Army, because yes, Bryson Daly can throw the ball, but he wants to run. The whole team wants to run. Udo's fantastic. I think that I want to see Navy's defense just slow that down a little bit. I think that's what's going to happen. And the thing for me is, you can list all of those numbers from the Navy side. You can list all of those numbers from the Army side. This is a completely different ball game. I don't like to say none of it matters, but it really doesn't matter until we get to those 4 quarters on Saturday.
This is the true throw the records out of the building sort of matchup, right? I mean, where you take exactly what you think might happen and then just wreck all that, and then it's going to end up being Army-Navy chaos.
The window, papers flying off the desk, all of that.
So
cannons going.
You said you're sitting in Landover, Maryland. You're at Northwest Stadium right now, right?
I am.
So
I am.
Are you looking out upon the field as we sit here?
I am looking out upon the field. It looks really nice. The end zones look nice.
Yep.
The logo's on the field, and in the center of it looks good.
Does it feel like some of that atmosphere is it just like the calm before the storm right now, a couple days out?
Calm before the storm. I would say it's a little eerie. I think they actually forgot about me in here. I don't know how I'm gonna find my car. I'm not even kidding.
Oh.
I was thinking that. I was like, I don't know how to get out of here, but
it's probably poorly parked somewhere. It's got probably over the line, got a couple tires over the line.
Yeah, that's how I park. We can't put the photo of my park job on here because my license plate's on there.
Nice.
But I digress.
Now,
what was the question? Yes, atmosphere is great here. I'm excited for Saturday.
Now, as you look out upon Landover, Maryland, and Northwest Stadium, What are your keys? I know you can feel it. The keys to winning, starting with Army.
Keys to win. Hold on, let me
and manifesting how this one's going to unfold.
Hold on, I want the field to tell me.
Okay.
My keys go back to what I kind of talked about earlier in the show with Army is Army needs to be Army. And that sounds so silly, but they need to rely on Bryson Daly to run the football, and they need to just continue to play as a unit on defense. I also think they need to make sure to not let that atmosphere and the environment and just kind of get to them, because there is so much in this game. Like even after they won the American, right? They're talking about beat Navy, beat Navy, beat Navy. So it's just drilled into your head at all points. And then you get into a stadium like this, and don't forget to be Army, right? Mm-hmm. You want to beat Navy, but to beat Navy, you have to be Army. And so that's kind of like that's my coach speak coming out, but it is so true. In these big moments, those are my keys for Army.
No, you and I have spent way too much time together, because my notes right here is play Army's brand of football. It's almost the exact same thing. Play Army's brand of football. Don't let the moment and the hype be too much. And I don't think that's going to be a problem. Let me preface by saying that, because if anything has been taught to us this year by Army as a football team and Jeff Monken as a coaching staff, is that the moment will not be too much. The only time they did not live up to expectation at any point throughout this 2024 season was against Notre Dame, who's currently preparing for their matchup in the college football playoffs. So I just, when I'm looking at Army, I don't think that'll be a problem, but you just won a conference championship. Navy's going to come in with refocused. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for you, where you've only had 1 week and an extra day to prepare for this matchup. There will be tough moments early in this football game. Army cannot get away from doing what Army does best, and that's be physical, run the football, and continue to pound away at the line of scrimmage. So that's my key moving forward. As I flip to the Navy side of things, my key for Navy is match that physicality. You have to bring the heat whenever you're playing Army. We've only seen a couple teams do it. Notre Dame did it early, challenged Army. Army went away from it. They got a little desperate, and that's how things snowballed. If you're Navy, match that physicality, match that intensity in the environment. Live up to the environment. Live up to that hype that you're going to feel walking into Northwest Stadium in this matchup coming up. I think if they're able to do that early, it sets the table for the rest of the game, because you have some firepower on offense with Blake Horvath, Eli Heidenreich, with Alex Teska. You've got these guys that can run the football, catch the football, move it downfield. The physicality and the line of scrimmage has to be met early, or else Army does what they've done all year, and that's score early and move the ball down the field, and that's when it's going to start to snowball for their opponent overall.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Again, we've been doing this too long together, so they're pretty much exactly what you had.
We're just in lockstep. That's all it is.
I don't, when I was putting in my notes, I'm like, this is gonna look like I'm copying him, but like this is what I think. But the one thing I'll add, and you already touched on it a little bit, but I think just Navy using the rest to their advantage, right? Like you have been off for X amount of weeks. You have time to get healthy. Use that to your advantage. And I know you kind of said something pretty similar, but I'll just extend it a little bit so it doesn't look like I didn't do my homework.
Nice. I love it. Now, there's going to be plenty of homework for us to do over the next few weeks, because not only do we have Army-Navy coming up, and we're really excited about that matchup, but it's time to go bowling like it's Thanksgiving, Maria Trivelpeice, because it's got an opportunity.
On Thanksgiving, but he didn't this Thanksgiving, just in case.
I was on the road. But the opportunity for all 8 of these teams, and showing the parity from the American Conference as a whole, to go bowling. I'll mention these very quickly. We'll just run down the list as we take a look at some of the bowling schedules. But Memphis, Tulane, UTSA, South Florida, Navy, East Carolina, Army, and then North Texas. This is the first page right here. Memphis in the Frisco Bowl against West Virginia. Tulane against Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl. We talked about that earlier. I love this matchup. UTSA in a de facto road game against Coastal Carolina in the Myrtle Beach Bowl inside Coastal Carolina's own stadium. UTSA's got a chance to make a statement on the East Coast. And then South Florida taking on San Jose State in the Hawaii Bowl. These are the first 4 bowl games up. Maria, which one are you taking a look at first?
Memphis, West Virginia. I've been looking at that one for a little bit, especially with the way that Yeah, but the way that Memphis played against Tulane, like they have a chip on their shoulder. They were hoping to be in that American Conference Championship game. They knew they weren't going to be when they played Tulane, so why not take away an opportunity from the Green Wave to host? Seth Hennigan looked so good, and they have the opponent in West Virginia. It's in Texas. I'm excited for that one.
I don't have anything going on next Tuesday, so I guess
Yeah.
I may make the drive over to Toyota Stadium and watch that one unfold at the Frisco Bowl. Should be fun. Here's the second slate of games, starting with Navy and Oklahoma in the Armed Forces Bowl on the 27th. East Carolina facing NC State in the Military Bowl, and then Army versus Marshall in Shreveport, Louisiana, the Independence Bowl, a tradition-filled game in its own right at the fairgrounds out in Shreveport. And then January 3rd, the final game of the American Conference slate this season. It'll be North Texas with an in-state battle against Texas State from Gerald Ford Stadium at SMU in Dallas, Texas, coming up on the 3rd. Which one of these sticks out to you?
Ooh, I mean, I like all of them. You know, I love when I get to see our American teams play. I'm intrigued by the Navy-Oklahoma matchup because Oklahoma's been an interesting team. They maybe didn't live up to some of their expectations, but had some funky wins here or there. And I want to see what the midshipmen do, especially after Army-Navy week.
Yeah, that Oklahoma win against Alabama late in the year, despite Oklahoma finishing at 6-6, pretty much kept Alabama out of the playoff entirely. Yeah. And the SEC in the first year of Oklahoma being in that conference, maybe a little upset at Oklahoma for upending an opportunity for one of their teams to get into the college football playoff. But should be fun. Of course, Oklahoma played an American team earlier in the year, beat Tulane, but that was in Norman. Hostile environment and an early season Tulane team that really wasn't up to speed yet, but they still had a chance in that game to win against the Sooners. So with all of that being said, Maria, it's time for our top plays. I'm going to let you start things off. Top plays of the week. Of course, we're working on some limited plays because of football season coming to a close, but plenty still to look ahead to.
We did include a lot of football in this week's top plays, but we'll start with women's basketball because you always have to have a couple ball plays in there. I know, Kyle, you're a big basketball fan. This one, UAB, they're in a close game with Auburn. It was really exciting to watch. Rain Tucker says, not today.
Nice.
Big block from her. I love it.
Gotta love it. I love some good defense. You talked about me being a hoops fan. I love women's hoops, especially whenever there's good defense, good post play. It is tough to beat. Of course, preseason conference player of the year, Tamisha Lampkin for North Texas, one of the best post players in the country. Blocks are one of my favorite parts of hoops as a whole. So, yes, nicely done down low. We go back to the gridiron, though. American Championship game, we talked about it, Army's defense. The physicality has stood out for them, but how about some finesse against a Tulane team that was one of the best in the country in terms of taking the football away? Army says, anything you can do, I can do better. As Anton Thomas cuts underneath the route, picks off Darian Mensah. Mensah can't believe it. This was a crucial drive for Tulane. It was 14-0 at this point, early in the game still. If Tulane works down the field and scores a touchdown here, that lead is cut in half. Then all of a sudden, Tulane has some momentum. Maybe they get a stop. Instead, this pick led to more points for Army, and the snowball continued en route to a conference championship.
Exactly what we just talked about, right? Army forcing Tulane to make mistakes. And man, that defense just in so many little ways, just figuring out ways to be good. But we'll head back over to the basketball court for play number 3. This is Rice men's basketball taking on Texas State. It's going to get kicked out to Alem Huseinovich. He's right by the logo. That is Caitlin Clark range, Kyle. You made that look so easy. How?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Rice has always had some great shooting, always had some phenomenal outside presence, but not necessarily the case. This year they're trying to find their role from outside, but that is exactly how you find how did you say that? Huseinovich? Huseinovich.
And the only reason that I can say it fluently is because he was at media day, so I had to learn it. In my second week of the American, he was a great interview. We'll probably have more of those interviews coming out soon.
Well, who says no to him shooting more threes?
Not me.
Exactly. There
I
you
think
go.
who says yes. Yes.
He earned that right. All right, speaking of earning that right, Tulane, despite losing to Army in that title game, earned the right to be there. And Mario Williams was a huge part of that throughout the year. He was their big play threat on the outside. This time, Darian Mensah finds him underneath, and it's all about the yak. Yards after catch. No one going to catch Williams as he stutter steps his way past the tackle inside the 5, celebrates with the band. A touchdown from 42 yards out. Mario Williams, one of the bright spots in the loss against Army in that title game. Tulane will have a chance to rebound against Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl and in their season, which has been phenomenal in year 1 under John Summerall in a positive manner. Mario Williams has been a positive manner in his own right.
He has been the entire season for the Green Wave, and that was a spark in that championship game. It looked like maybe they can find their way back into it, but Army just continuously putting the pressure on, and they even did it with their kicker too, Kyle, and that's going to take us to play number 1. I know I already previewed this a little bit. I mean, we've talked all year about Rayshawn Pleasant's ability to return the football and just run the football, and it looks like he's going to do it again here against Army, but the kicker, Trey Granati, making a hit and forcing the fumble for the Black Knights, just firing on all cylinders was Army, and this is another example of it.
I love this play so much. I really do, and it is very deserving of the top spot. The fact that we talked about the crucial side of the drives for Tulane. Every time they had the football, it was a really a must-score mentality, and the fact that Army said, forget that must-score. We're going to have a couple of turnovers, take it away from you, and turn it into points ourselves. That's exactly what Army's done all year. They've done it on defense. Now they get to do it on special teams. Shout out to you, Trey. You get it done on the special teams side. He's maybe earned some snaps on as like a safety or a linebacker or something.
I know. He's really setting the stage for another campaign next year. He's going to add more positions to his repertoire.
He's going to be Travis Hunter, except from a kicker defensive side of things. That's what he's going to be.
Interesting. I've never heard that combo before, but maybe I'll have to do some research for
I don't think it's happened in a long time. I don't think it's happened.
All right, that'll be my homework. Yeah. Because I have a lot of time to look that up this week.
A lot of time. You've got a game coming up here in a couple of days. Army and Navy. Can't wait for that one. Is there anything you're doing specifically, Maria, that those that are covering the American Athletic can look forward to?
Yes. Do I have it here? We got a new mini mic at the American. I'm very excited about it. We got a new mini mic, but I say that we're going to have lots of coverage throughout the week. There's some stuff already on the Instagram story. We're going to try to talk to as many players, fans, families as we can leading up to the game, throughout the game. So head over there to check out some of that content. We're excited about it. And I am so excited about my mini mic.
Nice. Mini mic content, as good as social gets here in 2024. I love it. I love it. Maria, it's always a pleasure. If you enjoyed the podcast today, make sure and subscribe, like, share, especially share. Share it with all your friends that are watching the Army-Navy game this week. We're making you the smartest person in the room this week. That's what we're trying to do. And we know everybody, college football fans, are going to be watching Army-Navy. We're trying to make you the smartest by giving you all this info and all this background information for both of those programs. And then we've got a bowl preview coming up next week, as well as we take a look in depth at all the games that the American Conference are playing in postseason action, starting on December 17th in the Frisco Bowl as Memphis takes on West Virginia. Maria, safe travels as always, continuing your cross-country journey, getting your morning miles and your airline miles in at the same time, making it happen. Appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to still sit down with me here on All-American.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'm sad I'm not in studio, but we'll be back very soon.
Can't wait after we've got plenty of football to talk about. But for Zach, for Chris in the back, for Maria Trivelpeice, all the way out in Landover, Maryland, I'm Kyle Youmans. We'll see you next week on more All-American.